Look, there's enough negativity, division, derision in the world. You can go online right now and see plenty of negative comments from the trolls, the naysayers, and all the people out there that want to give their opinion on things. So why would you add to that with negative self-talk? Your inner dialogue is as important to your performance as a leader, as an entrepreneur, whatever it is you are, whatever it is you're building right now. It's going to require all of you, the best parts of you. In order to elevate your game, you're going to have to learn how to talk to yourself like a winner, like a leader, like a high-level, high-performance individual that you are. Talking negative does not help with your performance. In fact, there's a lot of psychology that backs negative talk being not effective when it comes from you. If it comes from an outside source, that's a whole different ballgame, which we'll talk about. But in this episode, I want to give you 4 ways to elevate your inner self-talk so that you can elevate your performance and be the best leader, the best entrepreneur, the best human being you can, beginning right here, right now. What's up, my friends? JT DeBolt with you today for the True Driven Podcast, the podcast for the few, the true, the driven, those of us who have aligned and united to become the True Driven. And I say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whatever time it is for you, no matter where you might be tuning in from on the big blue marble. Thank you as always for joining me here on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, YouTube, youtube.com/JT DeBolt. That is where I can bring you new and updated content on a continual basis for all you true drivens out there to keep you sharp and keep you driven. So make sure you get over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and be the first to know when I bring new content to you on a regular basis. Great to be back. Took a little bit of a break from the podcast. A lot of cool stuff coming down the pike, and sort of pulled away for just a little bit, but I'm back. Very excited, refreshed to be here, and really passionate about talking about today's topic. I think this is a topic that every high-performance, high-level professional, high-performance, high-level leader has struggled with at some point. Perhaps you are struggling with it right now. I can tell you that I personally have battled this my entire life, literally as far back as I can remember and all the way through my professional career. Have you ever been in a situation where you are doing something that is challenging, probably something important, a non-negotiable, meaning because it's challenging, you can't back it out. You back out of it. You can't hand it off to somebody. Could have been passing a class in school. Could have been obtaining your degree. Could have been building your business, launching your first product, first webinar, building your funnel, whatever the thing is. Something that required something of you that was perhaps outside of your comfort zone. And you found it to be difficult, maybe even frustrating, thinking, man, I'm just not going to get this. Have you ever been in a situation where you were doing something that you had acquired a high level of skill and experience with, a high level of aptitude, but for whatever reason, you were struggling to succeed with it? Perhaps you expected a certain level of performance and you kept coming up short and feeling that kind of internal frustration. In those situations, it's very easy to start going down that path of self-doubt. And with that self-doubt comes the inner dialogue, that negative self-talk. And if this has ever happened to you where you catch yourself either internally or even externally communicating to yourself, saying something that is less than positive, I want to help you with this because I got to tell you, that is not helping your case. That is not helping your cause. Let me tell you a little bit of a story for me, how this played out for me and how this showed up for me. When I was a kid, when I would screw up, I would immediately get hard on myself, get down on myself, and say things like, man, I'm so stupid. Or how could I do that? What a fucking idiot. Things like that. Even as a young kid, I would say things like that. And I found that as I kind of grew through my teenage years, it got more and more volatile. And I was more quick to kind of have that criticism toward myself. And I think looking back on it, and from what I understand about how this thing works, with a lot of experience, I might add, that it was more of a self-defense mechanism. Now, there's a big difference between negative self-talk and being hard on yourself. Being hard on yourself, believe it or not, can be a beneficial performance enhancing behavior. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But I want to be clear that a lot of how we operate as human beings, especially if you're operating in a situation or in an environment that requires you to be at your best, not just physical performance like an athlete or anything like that, but mental performance like an entrepreneur, an executive, a leader. If you've got to perform mentally at a high level, your self-talk is critical to your performance. The type of self-talk that you give yourself will dictate how high, fast, and far you fly, business, life, or otherwise. Other people will see that that's how you treat yourself, and it could be to them a window in how you'll treat them. And it's funny because I have this conversation with high performers and I talk a lot about the way we talk about ourselves, the way we see ourselves. And what's always interesting to me is there's this little bit of if I'm being frank, self-defense mechanism in place where a person goes, yeah, I would never talk to my kid that way. I would never talk to my wife that way. I would never talk to my coworkers or my team that way. And yet you talk to yourself that way. If you can relate with this, let me know, because one thing I find is that a lot of times we're programmed, sometimes generationally, sometimes just through the way culturally we were brought up to have this kind of negative self-talk. That negative self-talk is somehow seen as a beneficial way of operating. Almost like there's some nobility to it. Like if I'm hard on myself, that demonstrates that I care. If I'm hard on myself, that demonstrates that I hold myself to a high standard. And there is some truth, again, to what I said about being hard on yourself, but how you talk to yourself, that's a very, very different thing. There's an old saying, you've probably heard it. I hope it doesn't come off as cliche because it is so powerfully true, and that is this. Words have power. The words that we say to ourselves, the words that we say to the world are very, very powerful. There's another saying you've probably heard is, be the change that you want to see in the world. So if you're looking around right now and you're not liking what you're seeing, if you're looking around and you're seeing things that are broken, you're seeing things that are failing, things that are weak, things that are ineffective, and you want to change those things, you have to start the change inside. And the reason for that is this. So much of the negativity and the vitriol and the complete spewing of venom from the world right now, the negativity towards each other on social media or otherwise. And it's mostly just on social media. You'll notice the algorithm seems to feed that shit for what it's worth. If you go outside, go to the store, go to the park, go to the theater, go anywhere in public, mostly people are going to be fairly nice to each other, right? There's not going to be that derision. There's not going to be the things you see on social media. Social media seems to amplify these things, make them out to be more than they truly are. However, we have to be very careful because what we project to the world is often a reflection of how we see ourselves. How we talk about the world is often a reflection of how we talk about ourselves. So wouldn't it make sense that if we truly want to be the change in the world, we would change internally first? If you truly want to lead others, lead your organization, lead your team, you have to be willing to lead yourself first. That's the most key and essential part of what we do here with the True Driven program is the ability to lead ourselves. That self-leadership is key and essential. One of the most important parts about leadership, you've heard me talk about this, is communication, how we speak with others. So let's talk about how we speak to ourselves. I want to give you some things to think about. Negative self-talk on the surface basically is one of the least effective ways to perform. It's different when you hear it from another person. So sometimes you'll see this, especially in the military or sports, where a coach or a drill instructor or a flight instructor will be verbally difficult, verbally challenging to the person that they're mentoring. The coach will be screaming at their players. The drill instructor will be screaming at the recruits. The flight instructor will be screaming at the flight student. And these things are meant to put the student in a heightened sense of focus because there is an implied threat So in flight school, my flight instructor, I had a couple of them that were extremely hard on me. But there was always a sense that they genuinely cared about the profession of naval aviation. And so they held high standards for themselves and obviously for the flight students that they instructed, including myself. They cared enough about me to want me to be my best. And that's where that kind of aggressive tone was coming from. But there was never a sense that it was about the personal attacks or anything where it was about my character or about my personality or who I was as a human being. It was always about the behaviors that they were trying to correct, the performance that they were trying to elevate. And you'll see that in a lot of great coaches that are very hard on their players. Or you'll see that about drill instructors to their recruits when they're trying to modify behaviors and correct somebody and actually transform them into somebody who can assimilate into the very demanding, challenging environment of being in the military. It's not necessarily the best way to go in business. However, it can be super beneficial. But it's different when it comes from an outside source, because you have the ability as the person to receive the message and be able to do something with it. It can actually propel your performance. It's proven. What's interesting, though, is you can even run this experiment for yourself. You can challenge somebody with an aggressive tone, but with an encouraging word. We tried this with our kids once when they were real little. We built a little kind of obstacle course in our living room with chairs and cushions and all this kind of stuff. And we said, we're going to time you, and however fast you go, we'll give you some sort of a treat. I don't remember what it was, a cookie. It doesn't matter. And so the first time we did encouraging words. Come on, you got this. You can do this. You're doing great. That kind of stuff. And they ran fast, man. They ran like the wind. They went through the entire thing. It was great. The second round, we actually used a much more negative tone. What are you doing? Come on. Is that as fast as you can go? Come on. That's not good enough. Those kinds of things. And what's crazy is you could tell the negative tone actually decreased their performance. The encouraging tone elevated their performance. We even tried it where we did the negative tone first, where they were at their highest level of energy. And then immediately when they were still catching their breath, we did the positive tone, the positive message, and they actually elevated their performance and got a shorter time. That was the one they actually got awarded or rewarded for because their performance actually was better. So you can tell that a more positive or uplifting comment to somebody will actually help elevate their performance. So if that's true for other people, how come it wouldn't be true for us? How come we talk to ourselves that way? Well, there's a couple of things that come to play. First and foremost, it can be behavioral. It could be like a habitual thing. You just learn this behavior through being raised that way. Now, again, I'm not pointing fingers and pointing blame at anybody, but I can tell you that that's probably where my negative self-talk originated from. I did, however, recognize that for me, being angry with myself, telling myself negative words like you suck, you piece of shit, what the fuck, like those kinds of things, talking to myself like that, it elevated my anger. And my anger is actually what sharpened my focus and elevated my performance, which is interesting. We talk a lot about emotions and feelings and how that can drive performance, especially physical performance. If you're doing something like lifting weights, playing sports, if you're doing something that requires a physical component to it, having a little bit of fuck you or aggressiveness in your demeanor, in your energetic state can help elevate your performance. It can sharpen your focus. A great person, Cody Sanchez. I love her to death. She's got some great stuff out there. Got a book that just came out, Main Street versus, I can't remember what the name of the book is now. Main Street versus Wall Street. That's what it is. Main Street over Wall Street. Go check her out. She's amazing. She actually talks about building angry as an entrepreneur, like finding that anger in yourself. Find something that you're fighting against. Find something that makes you angry that you are willing to kind of defend the good things against. I love that belief and I love that philosophy. I've talked quite a bit about that with you True Drivens, right? That's what we talk about in the end when we were talking about that kind of negative reinforcement, when we talk about how when you have that dark side, that edge, that causes you to find that kind of part of you that elevates your performance. But when we talk negatively about ourselves, it wipes all of that away. It's like knocking down a house of cards. It's like throwing sugar in your gas tank. It's just going to disrupt the engine altogether. So negative self-talk doesn't work. Let me just give you some things to think about. What it actually does, besides decreasing performance, is it amplifies the stress. So if you're already kind of stressed out, if you're approaching something that's typically difficult, and most of you entrepreneurs, that's what you're working with right now. You're building a business. It's challenging. It's difficult. There's going to be times where it's so dynamic and you feel like nothing is going right. Well, negative self-talk actually reinforces that stress or that anxiety. It reinforces the dread that you're going to have for the business. I mean, just think about it. The one voice you will hear from birth to death is your own. Even amidst the sound of being in a populated area, you could be at a rock concert, you're still going to always hear your own voice. The question is that voice beneficial? Is that voice elevating? Is that voice not just encouraging, but is that voice empowering? It's one thing to do it for other people. And many of you are tremendous leaders, and you care so much about your teams. You care so much about the people that you're working for and with that you won't hesitate to talk great to them, give them an encouraging word, but you refuse to do it for yourself. Negative self-talk actually decreases performance because it amplifies the other negative emotions that actually decrease performance. So sometimes we need stress. Sometimes we need that feeling of, time is ticking, that kind of thing. We need that sense of urgency. But too much stress actually decreases our ability to think clearly. And so when we talk negatively to ourselves, that's what we end up doing. The other thing is, it will actually decrease your toughness and your resilience. Think about it this way. If you walk past me 100 times a day, and every time you walk past me, I just go that hard into your shoulder. Same shoulder, same spot every time. Just bam. Not hard. It's annoying. The first few times that happens, you'd be like, all right, funny, joke's over. After a dozen or a few times, you're thinking to yourself, all right, this asshole needs to knock it off or I'm going to block him one or clock him one, right? If I keep doing that several hundred times, pretty soon that is going to be so painful to receive the hit to. That same spot becomes a bruise and it becomes a deep contusion after a long enough time and repeated insult and assault. So when we do that to ourselves with our words, because words do have power, words actually drive our performance. And so if we're talking negative to ourselves, we start to lose our mental toughness. We start to chip away at the foundation of mental toughness that we've worked so hard to develop. And that resiliency, that ability to tolerate assaults or impact or attacks from the outside gets diminished. So if you find yourself getting triggered or tripped up by somebody's negative words, take a little bit of an inventory about how are you talking about yourself, talking to yourself. Because if that's a negative self-talk, you're already doing the work for them. How come, why would you fucking do that? Why would you allow your haters and your trolls to get a foothold by reinforcing what they're saying? That makes no sense at all. The other thing I'll say about this is there's a lot of studies about the mind-body connection, and they have found that negative self-talk will actually drive and reinforce depression. So if you're in a situation where you're already kind of battling your own mental health, the fastest way to start recorrecting and getting yourself out of a situation that might be a compromised mental health issue is to start performing better self-talk. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of ways to do that. Let's talk about that right now. Step number 1. I want you to monitor your self-talk for the next week or so. Just notice what you say to yourself. Notice the kind of dialogue that you're talking. Notice the kind of words you're selecting. A couple of words I would caution you to look out for is can't. Now, way back, I used to tell this story from stage when I would speak on stage, and I still do when I speak from stage from time to time, is how when my kids were young, can't was off limits. That was the only 4-letter word that was off limits. I didn't care if they said fuck, shit, didn't matter what it was. They could drop any 4-letter word they wanted except for that word can't. One day my son was little, just a little guy, and he was going to play his first year of football, full contact, full helmet, pads, all that kind of stuff, football. And understandably at the time he was pretty undersized, so he was a little bit intimidated and just kind of mentally was like scared a lot. And what I loved about him then and still love about him now is he had that grit, that determination to still lean into it. He didn't quit. He didn't want to not play football, except for one day. We were driving to a game. He's in the back seat and he's crying. And my wife says, "What's wrong?" He's like, I can't do this. Dude, I stopped the car. I'm like, I never want to hear you fucking say that again. Any other word on the planet is on the table, but you can do this. You have done this. You're strong. You're courageous. You have the ability to do this. Right now, you may not be feeling that, but don't ever tell yourself you can't do that. And what's remarkable to me is how many fucking adults will get offended when I say the F-bomb or when I say any profanity. How could you say that? I have people leave comments all the time. I could take screenshots of that shit. It would be like a nonstop, like flash reel of all these comments that people leave me. You lose power and you lose effectiveness when you use that word. Oh, guess what? These are the same motherfuckers that say they can't afford this or they can't find the time to do that. They can't work out because of this. They can't build their business because of that. They will not hesitate to use the word can't, which is one of the most destructive words we have in the English language. So monitor your self-talk, especially over this next week or two, and notice how much you tell yourself you can't do something. Can't is a fucking awful word. Be very, very careful of that. Now, another thing I would say is watch out for things like I am or I blank. I am stupid. I am weak. I am not tech savvy. I am not very strong. I have ADD. Come on, man. Look, even if those things are true, is that statement helping you or is it hurting you? Is that statement a service or is it a sentence, like a life sentence, a prison sentence? Because your words have the ability to create whatever you want them to create. They can either create a prison cell or they can create propulsion for your business, for your forward behavior, forward action in your life. So if you're saying I am stupid or I am weak or I am not very smart, all of those things are being heard and being reinforced. Your brain's going, you're right. And so when you go to do the thing, naturally you're showing up where your performance could have been up here. It's going to be down here. You might be at an 80% energy level. You might be at a 90% knowledge level, but because you're telling yourself you can't, you just knocked yourself down to 60, 50%. You've tied your fucking shoelaces together and told yourself, I'm going to run a marathon with your shoes tied together. That's essentially what you do when you talk negative to yourself. It doesn't make any sense. So stop fucking doing that. Or I whatever. Like if you say I failed. I suck. I am like all of these things, not just I am statements, but the I blank statements. Be very careful. Take an accounting of how you talk about yourself and statements that you use on a continual basis. Step 2 is eliminate absolutes. What's an absolute? Everyone, no one. Everywhere, nowhere. All the time, every time. Never. Those kinds of things. If you're saying things like I never win, or I always fuck up, or I always forget, you're basically telling yourself that is a true statement, a truism for yourself. An absolute means absolutely all the time, or absolutely everywhere, or absolutely whatever. Everyone wins but me. I never win. Nobody understands me. These kinds of things. And by the way, I think what you'll find is if you catch yourself saying these things, ask yourself, is that true? So if you do catch yourself saying, I always fuck up, is that true? That can't be true. There's no way that's possible. I always forget. Is that true? The antidote to an absolute is the question, is that true? And if you're thinking critically and you're actually giving yourself a little bit of a fucking break, guess what? You'll find out that those absolutes are not true. That is the negative self-talk that is hampering your performance and making it so that you are going to basically tie yourself to the tree and say, this is as far as I can go. It's like that old saying about how they would tie an elephant to a tree or to a chair and have it train itself to think that that's the limitation of its ability. We do the same thing with our words. We basically tie ourselves to a tree and then assume that the rest of our lives is just going to be the same. Well, I always do this, or I never do that. I always forget, or I never remember. I never win. These kinds of things aren't going to help you, especially as a leader. As a leader, your job is to trailblaze. Your job is to risk. Your job is to put yourself out on the thin ice, the skinny branch, so that others can find the way with you. Yeah, you're going to fuck up. There will be times where you will make big mistakes. There will be times when you fall flat on your face. But the statement is, I get up. I am strong. I am powerful. I will fix this. Another thing I would say is when you test those absolutes, I always this or whatever, is that true? Give yourself a course correction on that. I will find a way. I will is a very powerful statement, especially against I am, especially if the I am statement is a negative one. Now, you can also counter a negative I am statement with a positive one. I am strong. I am capable. I am a leader. I will find a way. That kind of self-talk will help elevate your performance. So here's the thing that I would say, this was a game changer for me. The next part I'm going to share, step number 3, was a game changer for me early in my career. I found myself going down this path, utilizing old behavior patterns of talking hard to myself. Now, I want to be clear. It's okay to be hard on yourself, but to talk to yourself in a positive way. So you might have high standards for yourself. You might say, there is no fucking way I'm going to allow myself to slide into mediocrity, right? That's a positive statement. And you can be very hard on yourself when you do. You can say, hey, listen, this is not acceptable for us to be fat, unfit, unhealthy, broke, whatever. It is not okay to be sad. It's not okay to be whatever. I am a powerful, capable creator. I am a powerful, capable leader. Those are the things that start to turn the tide in your performance. This is not some woo-woo bullshit. This is you holding yourself to a high standard. And here's the game changer. Imagine you're talking to someone you love or hold in high regard. Would you talk to your kids that way? Hopefully not. Would you talk to your grandkids that way? Even if you don't have them, imagine having grandkids. Would you talk to the love of your life that way? Hopefully not. Would you talk to your grandmother or your grandfather that way? Would you talk to the person that you think is the most awesome leader, person that you aspire to be, somebody that you hold in high regard? Would you talk to that person to their face that way? Probably not. Because let's be frank, if you did, a high performance person would be like, fuck you, I'm out, right? So you are naturally going to say that to yourself. The question then becomes, and the great pivot, this worked wonders for me. And it still does. If I find myself slipping into that negative self-talk, I got to imagine, would I talk to my son or my daughter that way? And the answer is no fucking way would I ever say. Half the vile shit that comes out of my mouth towards myself, I would never say that to my kids. So why the fuck am I saying it to myself? That makes no sense. It's a great course correction and a massive shift. Give it a shot. The fourth element to this, to creating better self-talk for yourself and thereby better performance, is to rewrite the script. Now, what I mean by that is this, is find those things that you see as a consistent negative self-talk habit or a negative self-talk pattern. I'm stupid. Find the antidote to that, the adverb to that, or whatever it is. You want to find the one that the opposite version of that. I am capable. I am hardworking. I am smart. Listen, you're smart. You're comparing yourself to fucking Einstein, maybe. The point is that you don't want to have the constant reinforcement of that negative piece. So find what works for you and what makes sense for you to be the opposite of that negative self-talk. Rewrite the script. I heard very much, you're stupid. You're an idiot. So I would say that to myself. I'm a fucking idiot. Now, what's interesting about this is when you rewrite the script, don't say I am, instead say you are. Think of it this way. Your voice is hearing a message, and it's going to sound like it's coming from another person when you say you are. You got this. You're smart. You're awesome. You're capable. Let's go. Right? Those little things like that, when said in that way, are more believable, especially in a moment where your confidence is low, especially in a moment when the negative self-talk was already a possibility, maybe already happened, and now you're course correcting. So imagine your energy level. You just said something negative. You just knocked yourself down a notch. It's really hard to go, I'm awesome. Your body, your mind, everything is going to go, no, you're not. Fuck you. This is a trick. So say you're awesome. You can even pretend like you're saying it to your kid or to somebody else. You can pretend like you're saying it to the person that you love and admire the most. If that's not yourself, it should be. But if it's not, could be your spouse, could be your best friend, could be your brother, your sister, could be your son, your daughter, your grandkid, whatever it could be. But imagine saying that to them, but you're also meaning it to say it to yourself. It's directed at yourself. It's a very powerful way to flip the script. You rewrite the script by saying the opposite of that, keeping it super simple. This doesn't have to be the Magna Carta, okay? You just want to be able to say a few things in the short burst, especially before you're about to do something important, before you go in for that sales pitch, before you go in for that major presentation, before you go to do that major lift or that performance-based thing, before you go to roll in jiu-jitsu, before you go to propose to the love of your life, whatever the thing might be that's requiring you to be at your absolute fucking peak performance, to have the best focus, the best execution, the best kind of adaptability so that if the initial thing doesn't work right, you can catch yourself mid-stroke, mid-scene and be able to course correct and save the game, save the day, save the play, whatever the thing might be, save the sale. In order for you to mentally be there, give yourself the mental tune-up prior to. You got this. You're fucking awesome. You're a badass. Let's fucking go. Something like that is the only thing that needs to be said. Keep it super simple, but keep it on the encouraging side, the empowering side. And again, man, this is not about woo-woo shit. This isn't about kumbaya. This isn't about seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. This is instead about taking the shit-colored glasses off and seeing it through a different lens. And it goes to say that a lot of times the vision, the view we have of our own self, the lens that we see ourselves through, can be tainted or cleaned up through our language. How we talk to ourselves will influence how we behave, how we show up, the actions that we take, and therefore the results that we get. It's very important, my friend, that moving forward, you make this commitment to your performance. If you want better performance in business and life, if you want better performance as a leader, the fastest way, the surest way, and it costs you absolutely nothing, is to modify your internal self-talk. Now, if you're somebody who's got great positive self-talk, start teaching this to other people as well. Be a beacon of support. Be a beacon of leadership by continuing this message to other people as well. You catch somebody talking negative about themselves in an encouraging way, in an uplifting way, help them redirect how they're talking about themselves. Not everybody's going to buy into this. You might be thinking this is bullshit right now, but I'm encouraging you to take what I'm saying and put it into action. Don't just take my word for it. Put it into action. So for the next week, step 1, monitor your self-talk. Very important. Step 2, eliminate the absolutes. Always, never, nobody, never, that kind of stuff. Always look for those words if you're using them. Step 3 is imagine that you're talking to somebody that you love, somebody you admire, somebody who you want to encourage or uplift. And step 4, of course, is flip the script. Start changing the way you talk about yourself. It will modify the way you see yourself, and your performance will, in very short order, increase, and you will accomplish your missions in business and life. That's what I got for you today, my friends. If you got some value from this, make sure you leave a comment here on YouTube. Share this message far and wide, especially with other true drivens who need to hear it. And remember, no matter what course you fly in life, fly high, fly fast, fly far, stay driven.